when I thought about creating this group, I did not know that I was going to be, creating this for future so that I have like all my live interviews all set up for forever. Cause, it's 1,700 of them. So
You're that organized.
so I thank you guys. I thank you for joining us today. For those of you, if this is your first time, my name is Ronnie. I am a donor egg mom in waiting. And what happened to me in 2019, the best possible chance for me to build my family was with donor eggs. A lot of us have been given that news. And so when I was grasping and looking for someone who looked like me, I saw a little bit here and there, a little bit everywhere. And so what I did was I created a space that we could all come together. We started off with probably like 25 women initially, and now we have grown to 1,700 women in the group. And since I've been doing these things, we keep growing every single day, which is awesome to see. We were kind of stuck there for a while with members, and now we're seeing a boom. We're seeing a lot of things happening, and I think that's great for the community. So without further ado, this is my dear friend Shannon. She is, we've met one time. She actually was in Atlanta, and she was like, can we meet? And I said, yes. And so this beautiful soul has graced us with our presence. So why don't you take it away and start sharing your journey with us?
That my journey started in 2011 when I spent a year abroad in a medical orphanage with a bunch of little kids, little babies. And when I got home, I remember turning 30 at the time that following year and thinking, wow, I could adopt any one of those kids now legally. And I think that was the first sort of seed that was planted in my head in terms of wanting to be a mom. Unfortunately, at the time, I felt really discouraged. I couldn't find a lot of support for becoming a single mom, adoptive single mom at the time, especially from my adopted single mom, which is kind of ironic. So my dad passed away when I was very little. And so my mom, I think, was trying to avoid having me go through a lot of the same hardship that she had experienced raising two kids on her own. And that inadvertently set me back what was going to be 10 years. So in 2021, I finally kind of was getting to a point in my life where I realized that chasing adventures and chasing sort of that whole like live your life, whatever dream was just not actually fulfilling. I started kind of shifting. I remember that summer feeling like I needed to kind of get out all my last hurrahs. I met with my RE, who at the time she was a fellow at the University of Utah Reproductive Medicine Clinic, and she was fantastic. She was super supportive, and of course at the time, being so naive, being really idealistic still in my journey, I decided that I was going to handpick my sperm donor. He was going to be a known donor. I was not going to go through a bank. I was not going to spend middleman money on getting my baby. And at that point, it was just a lot of information gathering. I still have the back of an envelope that I took notes on from that call. And it just seemed like, okay, well, I need to do all these diagnostic things, right? And then I need to go buy some 5mm syringes and sneak those little sample cups from the doctors in the meantime when I go. Little did I know that it would actually be a whole another year before I wholeheartedly started trying. That I had actually found someone through, I think it was through Just a Baby, and a very professional but not serial donor, like the Netflix special, and. I don't know if anyone's seen that one. It's horrifying. It's worth a watch. But yeah, ended up trying to. I'm from California originally, so trying to commute from Utah all the way back to California while working full time with the public health department, and while trying to wrangle in a really, really irregular cycle. My cycle had never been regular. It had just between sports when I was younger and just having a wonky system, that really proved to be impractical. And so I had to kind of give that idea up. Um, and, the idea that this sperm donor who was this beautiful mixed heritage model, he actually is Drake's stunt double, that that I was like, okay, I'm not gonna have this, you know, uh, marble cut David type donor. And so I switched gears and started looking for someone local. And at that summer that I was trying, I was also fostering a little girl who kind of taught me that being a single mom obviously was going to be challenging, but that I felt like I could do it. It was kind of a little practice run. Um, and ultimately, I ended up having to things with her case became more drawn out, more a bit derailed, and so it was an interesting kind of turning point where I actually what we call in foster care disrupted the case. I said I can't take care of her while also trying to do these other things, and the temporariness of what was supposed to be a 2-week placement. It had been 4 months at that point. I had to make that tough decision, and it weighed on me heavily. It's not something that you like to do. You don't want to be one of those one more family that the kids bounce around to. And then the next cycle, I got pregnant. So I was like, okay, that's a little validating. I made a tough call. I don't think it completely absolved me of my guilt of giving her to this other family, but it was validating in that sense. And so at that point, it had been 6 months, and it was sort of within that kind of time frame of, okay, I can go ahead and have this idealistic, home AI, it's me and my 10 cc or 5 cc syringe, sort of strategy. And I felt like, okay, well, it worked, right? Like I got lucky, and let's see how this goes. And I never imagined that at my routine anatomy scan halfway through the pregnancy, at 19 weeks, that I would learn that my baby had no kidneys, that meant that he had no amniotic fluid. Sorry, I should have probably trigger warning that. And that he was not going to survive in any way. There were no fetal kidney transplant options. There was nothing that I could do. And so I made that hard call that I would have surgery. At that time, that was right when Roe versus Wade was being overturned, and there were all these questions, especially in a really conservative state like Utah. I remember wondering if I was going to need to go down to Vegas and go to a Planned Parenthood, or there were a lot of questions then, especially with my care, which had been excellent up until that point, but suddenly it just seemed like there were a lot of questions as to whether or not I was going to have the same access to care based on where I was living. So I had my surgery. I got really involved with online support groups with Perinatal Support International, PSI International. I made friends who had gone through, similar. Technically, that was an early pregnancy loss, even though it was the latest in that range. And all I could think about was, after I remember during the ultrasound appointment, getting the news, being in complete shock, and asking, do I need to get a second opinion? To which the answer was no. And the second question is, when can I get pregnant again? All I could think was, okay, this is a setback. This is not anything. I loved the idea that you got pregnant once, so you can get pregnant again. That's the biggest lie for some women, as it was for me. Well, in a way, for me. And yeah, and all I could. I mean, I think I tried the cycle before my period returned. Because you can technically still get pregnant that cycle as well. All I could think about was, okay, now I'm behind schedule. Now I was supposed to be a mom in September of last year. How quickly can I get back to that reality? I had already gotten all supplied up. I think I had 2 or 3 or 4 things left. And yeah, it was just such, the world had gone upside down at that point. And so when I at this point, I'm still trying the home AI. I said it worked once, so why shouldn't it work again? And this
So tell
time,
everybody just for reference what AI is for people
oh,
who may not know.
yeah, sorry, home artificial insemination. So you get very cozy with your syringes, no needles, but just a syringe, and you get to deal with all of the donors who, because I self matched through Facebook groups and through the app, just a baby. Then you get to deal with all the guys who are like, no, I only do NI, which is natural insemination. Um, and
So you
so
can just walk us through just a brief thing of like how it works, like how you obtaining it, and then the tracking and all that kind of stuff, and like the process of what you do just at home, in case someone wanted to know do that process, because there are a lot of women who want to be single mom and may not know about the process. It is a little bit cheaper. It really works. It can work. You have a greater chance it works if you naturally have your periods all the time. You naturally ovulate. You can probably see success doing this and not be going to always having to go to a clinic.
yeah, and part of the reason why I chose this, and I'll explain it, how the process works, was that, as other of your interviewees have mentioned, my AMH was really low. It was 0.185, I believe, when I first was doing the sort of general checks back in 2021. I knew that my tubes were patent, they were clear, but I had a low AMH, and that these completely irregular cycles were going to be tricky, right? So a lot of at home LH test strips. So yeah, so I was testing. I spent that first 8 months or so just tracking my ovulation at home, and at that time it was irregular, but it was still happening. So every cycle, I would get my darker, 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 and then darkest lines, and then they'd fade away. I kept them all. I taped them all into a little book, just like they recommend, and tried to find a pattern. Of course, there was none. With the self matching, basically donors and recipients post profiles. Um, I guess it's like dating, online dating, but you match, and then you try to make sure that you're a good fit. I would always ask for. I mean, it's quite standard to get this. It's very similar to at the sperm bank. So you get little kid pictures, you get adult pictures. Some people are, they want to hide their identities because they want to protect their professions and whatever. And then I'm like, okay, well then we could just move on, because I am not hiding my identity, right? And so my Facebook profile is out there. My full name is in my email address. It's very easy to figure out who I am. It's very transparent. You can Google me and find my phone number and all these other things, and you can actually verify that the things that I say are true, right? About being a foster parent, or about being involved in kids outdoors activities and things like this. And so you have to present your story, right? You have to be compelling. Some donors are pickier than others. Some will ship. Some will where they like actually just pack their samples on ice and overnight things to you based on when you let them know the go time, based on your tracking. And yeah, I found, like I mentioned, traveling with a wonky cycle just became not practical. I wasn't about to spend last minute flight fare all the time, every cycle trying this. It got really, I mean, and plus I couldn't do it with work, right? It was like where our clinics were scheduled out, and unless I wanted to not have my job. And so ultimately I actually did take a break from that job and really, really focus. I kind of figured, it's now or never if I am going to take this path, down take the motherhood journey and really prioritize it in my life. And so yeah, so I was having donors. I would either meet them at their work, or they would come by. One of my donors actually worked near my home, and so they the type of donor that I found worked for me, and there were multiple ones. Were um, like it felt strongly to me that they were in it for their hearts, that they wanted to help people. They weren't asking me for money. I would at Christmas time I would give them a gift, or I would find some other way to like make it clear that I was grateful for them taking time out of their days. I mean, scheduling was obviously so, oh, it was just so cumbersome, especially because what I was finding during that second round was my my testing lines wouldn't actually get darkest. They would just kind of be medium dark, and then there would never be a peak, which means realistically I never ovulated. So those
Right.
were, yeah, so those were all, gosh, I bet I could find my book, but it's the generic. I mean, it looks so generic. It's just these little strips that are glue sticked into a little journal, and you get line eyes because you're like, is that the darkest one? And you just start seeing things, and it's you kind of go crazy. Um, Month after month after month. And I'm not a morning person, so there were just so many times I'd feel so set back because you wake up in the morning and the first thing you think about is going to the bathroom, and then you're like, no, 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 I was supposed to do that into the cup, not into the toilet, right? And so it was just, yeah, I think that was, Ronnie and I talked about our triggers, and that, I mean, the testing is my trigger. It's having to remember to do that, wanting to see something that you just don't end up seeing on those little strips. At one point, I traveled to a donor who was in Europe, and he actually invited me to stay in one of he was living in his family home, and so I actually stayed in his sister's childhood room, and I felt like I was held captive there by my cycle. I was only supposed to be there for maybe the estimated time range of a week, and I think I ended up being there almost 2 weeks. um, and you could say it was a nice holiday in Europe, but I really wanted to get on with like my life. um, and so, yeah, I think there was a lot of that sense of feeling like my calendar was, well, maybe I'll be testing then, and maybe I will be ovulating then, and maybe I need to hold that time frame. And so you just feel like your whole life is on hold because of these hypothetical windows that may or may not happen. Did that cover most of the home AI stuff?
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah,
mean,
and
yeah. Because we know about it because we've done these
we're
things,
in
but
it.
yeah, we're in it, and so a lot of people don't even know. I do have people who come in saying they don't even know like about starting with their clinic. So just to give like a little overview of what you would do, because as stated before, it is a cheaper option if you can get it done. That way before you even start going more in depth into medical intervention. You can try to do that, and you don't have to do a nose spawner. You can get one from a bank. They will give you instructions on how to do
Yeah.
at home stuff. You will maybe have to get it, I think you can get it unwashed because it's not, don't quote me on that, because there's some that come with washed and unwashed. I think you have to get it washed. If you do IVF, like, it doesn't matter. They don't care because they're gonna do it. They're gonna
You're
prepare
gonna wash
the
it.
sperm anyway. So I think when you're doing it at home, I believe you have to get it washed because it's just sanitary reasons and bacteria and all that kind of stuff. So you do have to get that. But they will let and they'll usually ask you if you go to a bank how you are using it, and that way they'll tell you the best options to get for you. So those are just a few things.
So it was like probably right as I was starting round two. And because at that point, I had always been told by my RE that I was not a good candidate for egg retrieval, because of that low AMH, but that natural, or IUI would be on the table. But that always, always, always from day one, they had told me, and you would be an excellent candidate for embryo adoption. And so, yeah, so then the part of kind of gearing up for round two was bringing in more strategies, right? At that point, I had been kind of dabbling with my own biology. I had been licensed as a foster parent for a few years, and my placement coordinator knew I was very, very interested in a foster to adopt situation. Um, and so I had those irons in the fire. And at that point, I was still trying to conceive with home AI, with the way that had worked prior. And then I think it was that trip to Europe where I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I think I had one cycle more when I got back to Utah, and then I had to call it. I was like, I can't do these fate lines anymore. Like, this isn't happening. I don't know if I must have gotten the green light from my doctors. And I started exploring which Facebook groups I would post on my profile on. I feel like that decision happened almost overnight. Like, it was just one of those things where it was like, and we're done. And I put together a few paragraphs. Later, one of the moms in the groups actually plagiarized my profile, um, which my profile was still up, so I think they could tell who came up with the content first. But yeah, I posted in a general embryo donation group on Facebook. I posted in a specific Asian group because I was hoping to have some blend of my genetics, to not have to have the hurdle of just having that to explain and all those things. And then I posted in, and it was an LGBT plus inclusive group. And so I was like, I think the plus applies to single moms by choice. And so it turned out that that group was the one that produced within 24 hours. I couldn't believe it.
Wow.
So he is a Chinese dad who was living in the Bay Area for, I think, almost 10 years. Single dad, had 13 embryos from his one cycle with an egg donor. And of the one that he used in his surrogate took, then he donated 3 to another single mom, and then the 9 remaining embryos were up for grabs. And 2 of them were girls, 7 of them were boys, and they were all graded really highly. He wanted an open adoption. He wanted the siblings to know, the donor siblings to know each other. And I was like, wow, this is my donor. Another man also responded, and he is also, I guess, yeah, he's also Chinese, and is he runs an agency for same-sex couples to orchestrate everything, surrogates and repro clinics and everything. And because he knows all these families through their journeys, he knows who has extras, he knows who has leftovers. And so the embryo adoption part of that is his charitable work. Because I told him, I said, I'm not really interested in paying somebody to match me with anybody. I mean, otherwise, I just go to a clinic and get in line, right? And so I went with the first dad. He's been great. I also have some learning points from that experience where, instead of hiring 2 lawyers, one for me and one for him, all of whom I pay for, I use the National Adoption. What is it? National Registry. Ooh, I'm blanking. It's a adoption database, and so they have a template for, if you have a straightforward adoption of embryos, then you can just use that. And I don't know that we changed hardly anything.
So it may be
Yes,
nrfa.org. Yeah,
yes,
okay, yeah.
thank you.
nrfa.org is a very low cost place where, if you're looking to do embryo donation, that's either on, you want to donate your embryos or you receive embryos. A lot of couples use that in order to keep the cost low. I think, don't quote me, it's usually about 300 to 500
Yeah.
for just a basic contract, and it's just something that says, your name, their name. They get a lawyer to sign. You can get a lawyer to sign off in contract. Now, they do have lawyers on deck, that if you want to go in depth with your contract, or a lot of people go locally to their state and they talk to someone who kind of specializes in it, that industry is starting to grow a little bit more. So, but if you just want a basic contract, and I think it's good in a way, just because we want to say in a perfect society that
You
we're
don't
not
even
going
need
to
a
change
contract.
we're not going to
Yeah.
change our names in our minds about things, but things can kind of get murky, when it comes to it. So when you have your baby or something, and a couple's like, I want to know everything, and then that baby gets here and they're like, maybe I don't want to know, as much. And so, you don't want to spend like thousands of dollars on, a contract that essentially you guys may make some changes and some updates later on, so that's a good thing, that that it is available. You can go on there and look and just do some research, but a lot of people use it. They're very user friendly, and I understand that they're quick to respond too, right?
I found that, so from when I started, the whole process I think took less than 4 weeks. And that was in part because my donor thought that his storage fees were annually billed. And so he was trying to not have to be on the hook for the next year, which
That's
is
that
totally
daycare bill.
understandable.
That's that daycare bill. I keep
Yeah,
telling y'all about that daycare bill.
yeah, it is understandable because and so ironically he, at the time back in 2018 when he was creating his embryos, the agency that he worked with in California said the cheapest um, good clinic out there on the West Coast is in Utah, and it's your clinic. So yeah, so I joke that baby's first ride was me driving down to Pleasant Grove, 40 minutes from my house, picking up that R2D2 tank and driving them back up to my clinic. So yeah, it was just really coincidental in that regard. So yeah, so at that point I had done the NRFA contract, and it was right around that price point. I think it was like three and change, and then depending on your clinic, you need to have an additional letter of. Do you remember what that one is called? The letter of basically saying that a lawyer has looked at it. Like it's not like we just went and printed
Oh
something
yeah,
out. Like
and I think that's just dependent on the clinic,
yeah,
because
yeah, and you just exactly you just ask your clinic what they need,
mhm.
and then also if you want, the clinics generally have lawyer referrals, right? So if you do want to hire a lawyer for yourself and then pay for the lawyer for the other person, you can totally go that route as well. I do think that with those contracts, it's really hard to enforce certain things like what you were saying about like that change of heart, because having a certain amount of communication during the child's life, for example, it's just so subjective, right? Like if someone doesn't feel like talking to you anymore, well, they're not going to talk to you anymore, and you can't be like, you have to give me updates, right? Yeah. So yeah, so then by the time the the contract process took about 4 weeks. Then his clinic, UFC, released those to me. I drove them up to my clinic, and then at that point, then I can get in line for my frozen embryo transfer. Um, and so my first transfer happened in February of this year. I lost one of the baby girls in thaw. She didn't survive thaw, and so then the backup was the other baby girl, and unfortunately that didn't take. And at that point, I had met plenty of other women who had had transfers either of adopted embryos or of their own embryos, and I could not wrap my head around with the level of disappointment at that point. I had had plenty of cycles where I couldn't get pregnant naturally with my little home AI hack, but the the amount of resources, the amount of like, there goes a quarter of my one smart cycle, right? And there goes however many syringes and empty progesterone vials, and it was just, there's so much that goes into the preparation. I couldn't believe, like, how do other women do this over and over and over again? um and what I found out from that, and kind of generally from my journey, is like that some people are really equipped to be supportive in those instances, and some people just really aren't. And I guess like a kind of personal part of my story is that what I found after that first transfer was that my immediate family was not supportive. They, yeah, we had this whole thing happen, this like falling out, and I realized that some of the sort of like residual lack of support from 10 years ago from my mom, and from my brother just not understanding all of these processes that I was going through, and like how I was doing it, or what an emotional roller coaster it had been, what the loss meant to me the previous year. I actually went no contact with my family at that point. I said, you know what?
Oh.
Yeah, I can't have this negativity. I can't have this volatility. And I think I need to just go on this next leg on my own. And I had never done that before. And then lo and behold, I get back on the calendar for my second FET, my frozen transfer. I start taking all the drugs again. And on, I think it was like April 5th or April 3rd, I should probably know this. I go in for my second transfer. At this point, I have not done all of the rigorous, like, 4 acupuncture appointments before, one the day before, one the day of, da da da. I was like, you know what? That was enough of my own out of network expenditures. I am just going to roll into my community acupuncture clinic the day before my transfer. One thing that I did differently for the second transfer, which was like a little bit of my own mix of like throwing in some voodoo magic, was I donated blood immediately after my first transfer. I said, you know what? If the engine's not running well, change the oil. Right. So I was like, I'm going to do this. I knew I had enough time to kind of recover, took supplements of iron and everything. And I was like, that is the extent to which I'll go ahead and do something that, isn't necessarily proven in clinical studies and blah, 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 whatever. But just because I was like, I want a fresh start. I want to give this next embryo the best chance. So I, yeah, I blocked out the negativity of my family. I went to acupuncture. I had gone to the blood donation drive, and then went in and I was like, okay, here goes nothing. Right. And I even remember that I was so anxious again, because I was having this like psychosis about being behind, that I picked an earlier transfer date that was available, even though it wasn't with my doctor. And at this point, this was like a second doctor, because my initial RE had completed her fellowship, and so I was kind of like in this territory of just kind of trusting whoever they were going to give me, and not necessarily having like a long-standing relationship with my doctor. But I was like, you know what? Anyone can put that straw through me, right? And so yeah, so then I was like, okay, here it goes. I remember my friend and I decided on a whim to go down to Vegas. We were going to sit by the pool and play arcade games and just try to have a stress-free sort of 2-week wait. And on the drive down to Vegas, like about a third of the way, is when I got that call from CPS. And if there's any phone number that I'll pick up, always it's CPS, right? Because they have a placement need. I've been selected for some reason, and I need to get all the details so I can consider it. And this call was like no other call. They had a safe haven baby, a baby who had been surrendered at birth. She had been delivered in the hospital. She had not been exposed to anything prenatally. There was a special family circumstance as to why they needed to give her up, mostly having to do with the fact that she was born at 25 weeks. So she was a micro preemie. She was less than 2 pounds, and she had been in the NICU at that point for a month. And she was going to continue to be in the NICU until her actual due date, which was another 2 months. So she missed an entire trimester. But she was healthy and she was thriving. And so I was like, yes, I will take that placement. When do I get to visit her? And at that point, I thought maybe we need to turn the car around, because generally speaking, when CPS calls, the kids need to be picked up yesterday. But of course, because this child was in the NICU, there was actually plenty of time. the caseworker soonest available anyways was in a week. So my friend and I enjoyed our trip to Vegas. And, this whole time I'm wondering, am I also pregnant? Am I am I carrying a singleton or a multiples, right? Because if I have multiples, I mean, I can, I can tell myself that I can handle two babies. I don't know that I can handle three babies on my own. And so there was just all these questions. And of course, with foster care, things fall through all the time, right? Last minute, oh, they figure out that kin can come in and take care of the baby. So someone with higher priority can come in and actually be the placement. So it was all very, very tentative. I wasn't going to believe it until I met her. I wasn't going to believe it until I was the one who took her home. And so lo and behold, on tax day, on April 15th, I go to the NICU. I meet the caseworker for the first time. I don't know that she has the paperwork all messed up and that I'm about to get kicked out of the NICU. Um, but I go in and I meet this beautiful little girl. All she's doing is sleeping. She's less than 3 pounds. She's like this little, and I'm like, okay, this is the start of my family. And my phone rings, and the only other call that I will take that's not CPS is ReproMed. And so I step outside and they're like, hey, did you check your my chart yet? And I'm standing there in the hallway of the NICU, and I was like, no, because like, I'm busy coordinating with this case. We're going to try to have this visit happen. And they're like, well, congratulations. And so at that point, that's when I found out that I was however many weeks pregnant, I guess whatever they counted as. I think when you find out you're 4 weeks, right? Technically.
Uh, 4 to 5, yeah, 4 to 5
Yeah.
weeks, yeah. It depends
Yeah.
on the age of the embryo, but yeah, you're about 4 to 5.
Right. Yeah. Right. Because I had a 5-day embryo. So I was like, okay, here we go. And I remember talking to my therapist at the time. This was a therapist that I specifically started seeing because she was a mom, and because when I really really started when I had really started trying back in 2022 that first summer. I was like, I need to have someone who's just this consistent support throughout this journey. And um, she was like, well, it's a good thing you were open to twins in the first place.
Right.
And so yeah, and part of the reason why I had been on different media was because I was like, oh, I could show you a picture of Indy. But she's out of the hospital now. She's doing great. She's this little monster at almost 12 pounds because when I met her she was 3 pounds. And baby boy is doing well. It's I joked with my friends the other day that they're both my rainbow babies, and then one of them actually was like, they're your double rainbow.
The double
So
rainbow baby.
yeah. And so I think there's been a lot of tentativeness, a lot of reserve. I think it's a very like a very common experience from lost moms that you just don't trust anything, right? So I ended up with 3 anatomy scans. I did my amnio. I had posted on the group about amniocentesis, um, because I like, you just get so in your head about any kind of surprise, right? Because
Right.
that day that I went in for my ultrasound with baby boy one, like there was no way that you could have ever told me you're going to walk out of that appointment with a terminal diagnosis, right? A fatal diagnosis for your child. It was inconceivable at the time. And so I think a lot of what has informed my decisions during this current pregnancy, I'm at 22 weeks right now, is that any extra amount of information that I can get is good. So any extra check, any extra scan, extra whatever testing has been helpful. If anything, simply because it's not that terrible news, right? So any little bit of positive news, because it can still, the other shoe can still drop, right? I'm not out of the woods, and from what I hear, like, moms don't necessarily feel like they're ever out of the woods, and which is a terrible sort of fate to live. But the way that I described it was that I don't have a secure relationship with the rug under me, right? Because I know how it feels to get that pulled out from under you, just like so many of the moms in our groups, right?
And this is what I was telling you, everybody that I've had prior to it, I said this before you came on, is this is the first person we've had on who's still in the middle of your storm, especially with the trauma of being around, the same weeks of your pregnancy loss.
Absolutely.
It becomes very real that, I've gotten this far, and I know a lot of people get excited and, they see around you and they're like, oh, this, and you're like, yeah, I've made it to this part. I haven't made it past that. And I love that you were brave enough to come in the midst of this, because I think that it's raw, it's real. You have those emotions, you're in those emotions like every single day, because I'm sure that there is some level of anxiety every time you go to an appointment. Even though you have your baby girl, you're being in mommy mode, there is still, because I remember you making that post like, y'all gonna have to talk me off the ledge. Like, what does this mean? And I am unraveling. It's an unravel.
It's such an emotional experience, right?
Right.
Oh, by the way, I've only just now been able to glance. I'm Chinese American, so I'm ABC, American born Chinese. For that question in the comments. And I think that there's, it's kind of, I was listening to the last interviews, and kind of feeling like kind of tying together a lot of the common sort of emotional roller coaster threads, which are that if the moment you have, when anything is not straightforward, right? you we have this whole experience of compromise, right? Where you're just like, I thought things were going to be this way, and now we're going to do this instead. And then that was going to work. No, now we're going to do this instead. And so, and as mentioned before, I mean, there's that grief, right? That comes from each loss of a door, like those doors closing on you, the anniversaries and the timelines of things, right? So I was very, very, very aware at week 19 that this is what was happening to my last baby boy. My At this last anatomy scan that I had last week, I was shocked to find out that the baby boy that I'm carrying now is actually 2 ounces heavier than Indy, my baby girl, was born at 25 weeks. So I was like, damn girl, you were teeny. not just because you were early, but you were just already teeny.
Right.
But yeah, like you can start to kind of compare things. And I mean, even last year, right, when my baby and my first baby boy's due date rolled around, right, and it's just crickets. Nobody, right? The friends who had planned my baby shower. I mean, I am dragging my heels on getting my invite list to my friend who's planning this time's baby shower, because there's still, yeah, that feeling where you're like, do I really want to announce this, right? It's that part is very real. And like my therapist said, she's like, all of the things that we go through make that reward that much greater, right? And I have to think that. I mean, I feel nothing but gratitude for Indy. I mean, she's an amazing little girl. Everyone says she's a fighter. I was like, she's smarter than that. She's not. I mean, she's waving her arms and legs around for sure, like as a newborn, um but she's got this like very kind of like dodge all the bullets rather than, kind of way about her. But yeah, I it's been, there's been, that bitterness that makes the sweetness more sweet.
Right.
And all of the surrender, you know what I mean, that we have with especially in the single moms groups. Like, you just get these hard-headed women, like I self-identify as one, but you just learn that, like, you don't get to be in control.
Right.
You don't get to, yeah, this is, yeah, someone else is in charge. And so, yeah, I mean, so I think there's still a part of me that's like not fully believing that this is real.
It's real.
um and well, like, and like that tentativeness, right? Like, where I won't I won't believe. I mean, baby boy's starting to like do jujitsu in my belly, so it's like I know he's in there. But there's been a lot of
Right.
denial, right? And a lot of like, well, don't get too excited, and the tempering and everything. And thank goodness that I have really supportive friends, that we have these groups, right? It's be able to have all of this practical information, to have the emotional support, to have the that sisterhood, that camaraderie. It's because for each person, as you're going through it, it's still your first time, right? And you just don't even, nobody prepares you. No one prepare the book that I posted, the Women of Color, the Infertility book. It was so validating to like read stories, right? Because you hear stories and you meet other women or whatever, but like to actually have this book, to see the words of like how crazy making those 2 week waits are, and dot 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 dot. It's just been, yeah. If I was, I mean, I'm a single mom, but I don't feel alone, you know.
And that's a great thing to feel like, because we always, we see it every time when people come in, they're lost and don't know what to do, and then they start to talk in the community and be a part of the community and see that we're there to be supportive, because sometimes that's all you need to say, okay, I can do this. And we're always available. We chime in as quickly as we can, and if you're willing to accept the help or get the direction, we're going to be there to support you all the way. So if you're just joining us, this is Shannon. She is a member of Every Shade of Infertility group. She is Chinese American. She was born here. She's also, you're also, no, your mom is adopted, right?
Yeah, yeah, and that's been beautiful to watch. That she instantly, our last name is Wu, like Wu Tang, and when she met baby girl, she was like, oh, she is definitely a Wu, right? Because she can she can see past bloodline, right? And
Right.
growing up, there was never a question that my mom's adoptive mom was the mom who loved her the most, because we were still in touch with her biological family. It was during a time when a lot of extra girls, little girls, were given to family friends and neighbors. And so I grew up knowing both of my grandmoms. And yeah, I think that's what sort of deeply, deeply incepted that idea that, yeah, that the AC's, G's, and T's like don't matter, right?
Right,
Like,
right.
yeah,
And
yeah,
we can talk about too, because actually, it's a very similar situation to Neza last week. She's actually adopted mother. She got her daughter as well through foster care. She got pregnant with egg donation, and then she's on her third transfer right now with embryo donation. And now that you have your daughter and you're carrying your son, how is the love for both of them, even though he's not here physically yet? How are you feeling as far as genetics and bond, and how is that going for you in the womb and outside the womb?
so it's really interesting because both of my kids are adopted. One will be passing, right? Because the baby boy is half Chinese and half redhead Utah college student who was the egg donor. Yeah.
Wow.
And so and the one dibling, the one donor sibling, he actually kind of looks like my brother when he was a little baby. Yeah, so I was like, okay, that works. And of course, there's no guarantee that the siblings will look alike. But it it raises these really interesting questions because Indy's biological parents are from East India, so the area near Bhutan. She has really, really dark skin, this beautiful like dark chocolate, and then she's got all sorts of shades. She's like kind of caramelly in her cheeks, and she's gorgeous. And I think that there's some sort of ingrained cultural sort of modesty, humility, where I feel like I can say things about her, like I can give her certain praise and compliments because she's not. I didn't make her, right? So I'm not. It's not self-aggrandizing. It's more just like, look at this little baby that I won in the baby lottery, right? Like, and for a while, in fact, when I was going to the NICU, I was really experiencing like really, really strong imposter syndrome, right? I run a single parent group for foster care here in Utah, and so I know how many moms are waiting and how many families are waiting for this like golden ticket of an infant that's adoptable, and an infant who is not withdrawing from substances nonetheless. So without those associated health complications and behavioral complications when they grow up. And so I at one point, with the feeling that, knowing that I guess it's technically a trans ethnic adoption. We're, she's South Asian, I'm East Asian, so we're technically the same race, but transcultural at least. I reached out in our directory to every Indian sounding name, a parent on our group. I ended up having coffee with the 3 out of 4. One of them was the dad of one of the couples, and so needed to watch the kids. And I really wanted to, I'd reached out to them and asked them, so I now have this responsibility to make sure this little girl knows her culture. Would you like to be part of that bridge? And I told them about how there was these feelings like I didn't necessarily deserve her. And it was quite beautiful how they flipped that script. And one of the dads said, Shannon, you can think about how she deserves you. And I know, and I was like, oh. So, yeah,
We've been doing good for the last 3. Don't make me cry.
And that's been a theme, right? Of like this deserving and undeserving, and yeah, whether or not it's not me to decide, right? I feel like that absolutely super, super, super lucky to have gotten my name picked, right? When that case came up. I absolutely adore Indy. She's super cute. It's funny because I think that there was some comment like in an old post about how like people will see what they want to see in your kids, right? And I remember when I first brought her home, she would do this thing with her nose, and I was like, you have my nose, like, right? Like, and of course she doesn't have my nose, but of course she does, right? And so yeah, I think that there's these little moments where there's no question, like, that she has all of my adoration and she has all of my love, and that didn't come immediately, right? When I first met her, she was this tiny thing that should have been a fetus. She wasn't very responsive. I would go into the NICU for skin to skin, and I would just drop her into my sports top, and she would be this big on me. Like when her head grew, when she was tall enough where I couldn't clear my chin, I just thought it was the weirdest thing because she had just been so tiny for so long, and all she would do is sleep, right? And so there's no interaction, and I just thought, okay, well, my job right now is just to like be her fake womb, right, outside of the womb, right? And I would just spend every night until they would kick me out around like midnight or so, around then. But yeah, I think that bond, I don't worry about that. I felt back in 2011 when I was working with the kids at the medical orphanage that I could have taken any one of them home. And yeah, we'll see. I do, if I had known, there's of course no way of knowing, but what I sort of don't like, that we'll negotiate as a family when the kids are older, is I don't like that Indy is not passing as my kid, right? She will stand out so distinctly, and I don't ever want that to get into her head. And so kind of navigating that is definitely something that I want to be mindful of. Like, if anything, it makes me wish that the baby that I'm carrying was also blatantly not mine.
Right.
Because when I walk around with her, I think people are very generous with their, she's so cute and congratulations and everything, but I don't think that anybody actually thinks that she's my biological child. I'm not, I can't be sure what's going on in other people's heads, but
Right. And I mean, that's a valid feeling to have, because, we talk about that all the time, is, you know,
What if
what
your
if my
kids don't
baby
look like
doesn't look like me, and what are people gonna say, and people are gonna think. And I think that, as she gets older, because she's what, 3.
She's technically 2 months adjusted, but
Mhm.
she's 5 months old.
She's 5 months, and it's still, she's still growing, she's still, you know doing all the things. I think that once she gets to having like a true personality and all the things, I think it'll go out the window. um it's just time. Even I say this all the time, just for people, just in general. Kids are not required to love you because you give birth to them or you take care. Like what happens is there's a innate bond that happens when you're feeding them and you're clothing them and you're kissing the boo boos and
And
all
you're
this kind of
loving
stuff.
on them.
Right, and you're loving on them, and that's where the bond begins. It doesn't begin at birth. It begins when you're putting in the work to take care of this child. So, you know, you're actually going through something that a lot of women just go through. It's kind of like you're pregnant, so there's that set of different emotions. You're dealing with a newborn that was in NICU. For anybody to see this, like, that's a lot to deal with, on top of trauma of miscarriages and going through different donors and having a failed FET and all these different things. And to expect you to just be like, oh yeah, I love that it's not like a clear black and white situation of, yes, I automatically feel this way, because the truth and reality is we don't always feel that way. And that's okay. That really truly is okay, because biologically you could be going through those same things as well. And that's just something that you navigate through either therapy or your friends or your village, to say that I understand where you're feeling, and not feel a sense of judgment towards you. Is saying, like, what can I do as your friend to support you through this, kind of type of thing, because I would be overwhelmed. You had no idea that this was going to be dropped in your lap. Like, foster care baby, NICU. Oh, and by the way, while you're here picking up this NICU baby, you're pregnant.
You're pregnant, right? Yeah. No, it was so
Listen,
crazy.
I told you God to show out and show up for me, but I didn't mean like all like this.
When it rains, it pours, right?
Right, right.
Absolutely. And let
Right.
me tell you another thing too. I think that's kind of funny about how, like, I'm so glad that this like the experience of being pregnant is something that's so sought after, right? Like, by using third party embryos, third party donation, that we can still start that experience at that point. Because for me personally, India is my takeout baby. This is my take and bake baby, right? And I don't enjoy being an oven. Like, if I could just have the bun already baked, it's been, yeah, I having Indy and having her pre cooked, like, it's just been, it's been a great entry into motherhood. Because when I brought her home and my friends were like, do we need to start a meal train, do we need to do this, do we need to do that, I was like, you know what, like, I thank you, like, I appreciate all of this generosity and everyone thinking for me, but I'm not recovering, I'm not healing from labor and delivery, right? If anything, I was like, I kind of am the dad, right? Like, the one who just gets up and does the night feedings, right? And the only difference is that since I'm not splitting it, it's like I'm doing a little bit more than that, but not the full package, right? And so in December, when I'm due to be induced, that's really when I think I'll feel it the most.
Right.
So yeah, but it's yeah. I mean, I think it just goes to show that there's a path for everyone, and a lot of the moms that I've met along the way are doing things totally differently, right? And there's beauty in every journey, right? And however you are writing your story, right? So
Exactly. And this is what the thing is, what people don't realize is, if we had this same interview a year from now and the baby's here, we wouldn't be getting these honest answers from you because they would be washed away. You would then be fully into mommy mode. You know, your first
I
daughter,
would
your
forget
daughter,
even more
yeah, you,
details.
yeah, you would just forget everything. You're like, oh, it was worth it and all that kind of stuff. So I like that this is something that's real because you truly are. You're still in, even though you're pregnant and everything, you're still in a grayish area,
I
that
feel
you're
it.
going through, and I think people need to hear that and understand like that is okay, because we've all been there, even the ones that have come and they've all been in that gray area of, will I get here to that side? And it's a situation where, what do you say? Sometimes, like you said, you don't even know if you should be excited, or, people around you. I think I said before is, I don't even like to say like I'm gearing up for a transfer because everybody's like, "Oh my gosh, are you excited?" I'm like, no.
I didn't know how I was going to do it again. All of those butt
Right,
shots, I was like, I mean, and even when they reduced the butt shots to every third night of butt shots, I was just like, I thought I was tough. I thought I was athletic. I was like, I can go climb any mountain, but tell me to walk around with a sore behind like every
right,
single day. And
right.
oh, it was, yeah, like I said, I don't know how other women, how y'all do this because it's, yeah, oh, no.
It's definitely tough, and we had our past retreat this week, and it was like a small group, but I mean, we all just talked about the same things. It's so good to be like in the same room and knowing that there's women who are on the other side, and we got to meet, one of the, because she lives around the corner, so we got to meet her daughter, and I talk about her all
Mm,
the time, and I'm like, this is like, she's the OG baby, because the group, I was like, I can kind of pinpoint when the group started because it was, she's 3 years old. And so I was like, this is when it's, we pretty much came to light. And I was like, what I see for us is our children having these same like seminars and guiding these other kids, for the future, to say like, it's okay. And they were just looking at me, like, I dream big. Like when I dream really, really big. Does it necessarily mean like, oh, it's going to happen? Like, no, but I dream very big for this community and the things that are going on. And so, the real time is something that I wanted someone to share because I'm in real time. And, I don't always, and I'm a firm believer in boundaries. And I'm like, look, you can know this part, but I don't want you to know this part, in that situation. So I'm glad that you were transparent enough to come on and talk to us.
I think it's
What
so,
do you see?
so
What do you
important.
So are we like, so we get this? Do you have any remaining embryos, or what are you gonna do?
Yes. So, and that's, yeah, that was definitely something that I wanted to mention too, which is that
Right.
the only part of my agreement that I wasn't stoked about with my embryo donor was that he wanted it to be that if I had leftover embryos, that I would destroy them. And it turns out that there's a clause in the part of the contract that I signed when I delivered the embryos to my clinic, which is that if I die, I get to pick somebody. Which obviously I don't want, like, right, but I thought that was interesting, right? So that like the only workaround for that, because I have a friend who during this journey offered her two embryos to me, and then when I said yes, I was interested, when she went and checked with her husband, who she was also simultaneously trying to file a divorce with, he said no. So yeah, so I said, Jenna, I'm leaving these to you. You do whatever you want with them,
Right.
but you are the best candidate at this point of who I know. And when I agreed under those terms to accept my donor's embryos, I kind of, in the back of my head, I still kept in mind that if it got to the point where I had completed my family, and if I knew someone, or found someone, who would be a good fit to become part of this sibling network, that I would present it to him. Like I would feel comfortable saying like, hey, I know this is what you thought back in 20 whatever,
Right.
23. But especially because he and I have had a really good line of communication in this time. Like he knows about I think I told him that February's transfer didn't work and therefore that I had lost two of the embryos. Um, Whereas the line of communication with his other recipient mom, who received her embryos in the beginning of last year, has been silent, right?
Right.
And so I think yeah, building that relationship even starting from now, right? I mean, he didn't ask me for any payment. He even offered an extra month's storage because he was lacking on the contract, and so it was very natural for me, like when it was Chinese New Year's, to like send his kid a red envelope, right? To like be like, I'm your auntie, right? Like we're all right, we're all family now. So let me make sure and yeah, do that, right? So again, to make sure that everybody feels acknowledged and appreciated, for all of this work that in our country has been commercialized, but doesn't necessarily have to be, right? So yeah, that's what my, I mean, I would love to feel so confident that right now I could be thinking about it because I've started to think about it,
Yeah.
because I'm like, what if this actually works out, right? Like,
Right.
what if baby boy actually comes home in December, and because uh, then I'll have six extra highly graded
Embryo.
Hapa embryos, yeah, that are, there's the number of half Asian, half white, families out there is just growing, 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 right? So, um, yeah, and a little, just to backtrack a little bit, I think documenting our stories like this is just, it's priceless, and I think that without your invitation, um, I I remember recording a debrief with my maternal fetal medicine doctor about my experience having a DNE, thinking that I didn't want to induce when I was losing my first baby, dot dot dot, and that's like probably the second closest thing, and it was a bit more of like a one way versus an actual conversation. I just recorded it on my phone. But I think that when we are in this space, like I guess I should just say, speak for myself. I started really, really, really falling off on posting and on everything just felt so heavy and everything felt so, it's like you want to get everything perfect because it is such a like a heavy topic. I remember asking my friend who came to the funeral home with me to when I went to see my baby, and asking her if she could put together a little like photo story of that chapter, and not being able to get past the edits, and so I think, yeah, finding this way to capture this moment is priceless. It's invaluable. So thank you for that. It's
Thank
amazing.
you. I appreciate you coming. If you're just joining us, we have Shannon. She is, I talk about every shade of infertility. So I try to get, more than just, black and brown. I want all shades of infertility. So she is Chinese American because we are the ones who are deemed as fertile. And so when we're not, it kind of looks like, well, what's wrong with you? So I wanted it to be culturally just all the shades of the rainbow that come in. And you see, last week we had Neza, who is Filipino. We've got Shannon, who is Chinese American, so that you can see like all different things. And hopefully that resonates with you. She suffered a miscarriage with her own egg, at 19 weeks. And then she turned to embryo donation as her second choice. She's also a foster care parent. And so she has a little girl now that she got on the same day she found out she was pregnant.
Yeah.
I know, listen, that bond question was something like, you just don't know what quite to say. But I think it was real, especially you being in the middle of something is truly real. And to help people understand that you may not always feel this instant connection, and that's okay, you know. And I'm sure you're like in therapy processing this all, and you've definitely helped someone in this chat maybe who didn't speak up. And that is what is important. Your story is going to blow people's minds. I keep telling y'all that. I did not realize that people were watching, and I don't have like a big subscription page. If you guys are following me, you can go to the link in my bio. There's one that says YouTube. It goes straight to the YouTube channel. You can subscribe and get notifications. So I appreciate you, Shannon.
Appreciate you
And
too.
keep
Thank
me
you so much.
posted on the baby. Congratulations. And you made it without
Thank you. Oh yeah, I went ahead straight to the bathroom in 2 seconds. I swear, baby boy is
let me get
just
you out so
pushing.
you can go to the bathroom. And I thank you. And I, you know, I pray for you every day. And I can't wait to meet baby boy.